The courtroom was already full when Delia Oakes walked in with a mop bucket. She wasn't supposed to be in the gallery. She was supposed to be in the hallway outside, cleaning up the coffee someone had knocked over near the water fountain, moving quietly the way she always moved, head down, cart ahead, invisible by design. But the door to courtroom 4B had been propped open, and she'd heard something that made her stop. She'd heard the number wrong. Not wrong like a mistake. Wrong like someone had made it up. She stood in the doorway, hand still on the mop handle, and listened to Jeffrey Aldrin, senior partner of Aldrin and Forsyth, one of the most decorated corporate attorneys in the state of Illinois, present a damages calculation to the jury that she knew, with absolute certainty, did not add up. She'd done the math in her head in about 4 seconds. She stood there a moment longer. Then she pushed the cart back into the hallway, parked it against the wall, and sat down on the bench outside the courtroom door. She had 40 minutes left on her shift. She ate her lunch at her cart most days, a habit she'd picked up because the break room on the 3rd floor always smelled like burned microwave popcorn, and the conversations in there made her tired. She was 31 years old and had been cleaning the Cook County Courthouse for 6 years, and in that time she had learned that most of the people inside it, the lawyers, the paralegals, the clerks, had very strong opinions about who was worth listening to and who was not. She was, by every measure they had, not. But the number was wrong, and a man's company was about to be dismantled because of it. His name was Marcus Buell. She knew that much from the placard on the courtroom door and from the case file summary that had been left, forgotten, on a bench outside 4B 3 weeks earlier. She'd picked it up to throw it away and then read it instead, standing in the hallway because the summary on the cover page had caught her eye. Aldrin and Forsyth v. Buell Industrial. Breach of contract. Damages sought. $4.2 million. She'd set the file down on the bench where anyone could pick it up and gone back to work. But she'd thought about it. Marcus Buell ran a mid-size fabrication company in Cicero. He employed 83 people, most of them from the same neighborhood she'd grown up in. The lawsuit alleged he'd failed to deliver a contracted quantity of steel components to a logistics firm, causing downstream losses. The number, $4.2 million, was the plaintiff's calculation of those losses. Delia had done some reading after that, not because she had a plan. She didn't have a plan. She read the way she always read, because she couldn't help it, because numbers were a language she'd spoken since she was 8 years old, and sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, working through her older brother's algebra homework while he watched TV in the next room. She'd never gone to college. She'd gotten pregnant at 19, and her daughter Raina was now 11 and in 6th grade, and had recently won her school's math Olympiad. And sometimes Delia thought about the ways inheritance worked in ways you couldn't see. She'd read the case documents that were publicly available on the court's online portal. She'd read the plaintiff's damages model, and she'd found the error. It wasn't subtle. It was a compounding assumption buried in the 3rd appendix, a multiplier applied to projected downstream losses that double-counted a single quarter's revenue. The kind of mistake that happened when someone built a spreadsheet fast and didn't check their work. The kind of mistake that compounded over 4 years of alleged losses, inflated the number by somewhere between $900,000 and $1.1 million. She hadn't told anyone because there was no one to tell. She was a courthouse janitor. The math was not hers to give. But today, Jeffrey Aldrin had stood in front of a jury and cited the number with total confidence. And she had heard it through an open door. And now she was sitting on a bench in a hallway with 40 minutes left on her shift and a feeling she didn't entirely know what to do with. She pulled out her phone and looked up Buell Industrial's listed contact. Then she looked up the case attorney on record for the defense. His name was Terrence Polk. He was a solo practitioner with an office in Oak Park. His website had not been updated since 2019. His profile photo showed a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a suit jacket that had been photographed in better years. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment. Then she called. It went to voicemail. She left a message that she later thought was probably the strangest voicemail Terrence Polk had ever received, which was saying something because he'd been practicing law for 27 years. She said, "My name is Delia Oakes. I work at the Cook County Courthouse, building maintenance. I've been following the Buell case, and I think there's an error in the plaintiff's damages calculation, specifically in Appendix C of the 3rd amended complaint. I can walk you through it if you want. I know this is unusual. I'm sorry for calling out of nowhere. She left her number and hung up. He called back 11 minutes later, while she was cleaning the second-floor men's restroom. This is Terrence Polk, he said. I got your voicemail. Thank you for calling back. A pause. You said you work in the building? Yes. Maintenance. Yes. Another pause, longer. What kind of error are we talking about? She told him. She walked through the appendix, the way she'd walked through it in her own head. The compounding assumption, the double-counted quarter, the multiplier applied to a baseline that had already absorbed the same revenue figure once. She did not use hedging language. She did not apologize for the math. When she finished, there was silence on the line, for long enough that she checked to see if the call had dropped. How did you? He started, then stopped. She could hear him thinking. Can you send me your analysis? I don't have anything written down. It's in my head. Then can you write it down and send it to me? Tonight? She thought about Raina's bedtime, about the homework she still had to check, about the load of laundry sitting wet in the washing machine at home. Yes, she said, I can do that. She stayed up until 1 in the morning at the kitchen table, with her daughter asleep down the hall, working through the analysis in a Word document on her laptop, the one she used to help Raina with her schoolwork. She wrote it out clearly, the way her 8th grade math teacher, one of the only teachers who had ever truly paid attention to her, had taught her to show work. Step by step, assumption stated, calculation followed, conclusion supported. She emailed it to Terrence Polk at 1:14 a.m. He read it at 5:50 a.m. and replied with 2 words, call me. She called him from her car before her shift started, parked outside the courthouse with the engine running for warmth. I showed this to a forensic accountant I know, Polk said. She confirmed it. Delia didn't say anything. Miss Oakes. His voice had changed from the night before. Something in it was careful, precise, like a man choosing his footing on uncertain ground. I want to file a motion to exclude the damages calculation and introduce a corrected analysis. But I need to know, how did you find this? I read the documents, the public filings. Yes, and you just... He paused. Again, do you have a background in accounting, finance? No. Then how? I'm good at math, she said. It was the simplest true thing, and she was tired of finding longer ways to say it. There was a silence that felt different from the others. Not skeptical, something quieter than that. I'm going to need to request a continuance, he said. And I'm going to need you to be willing to be identified as the source of this analysis. Not necessarily to testify, but to be named. Is that something you're willing to do? She thought about the 83 people who worked for Marcus Buell. She thought about her daughter asleep in a bedroom with Math Olympiad ribbons on the wall. Yes, she said. The continuance was granted. The motion to exclude was filed 2 days later, and it cited Delia Oakes. Delia Oakes, courthouse employee, whose independent review of the damages appendix identified a material compounding error as the origin of the corrected analysis. Jeffrey Aldrin's office found out about it the afternoon the motion was filed. She was mopping the 3rd-floor hallway when she first saw him. She recognized him from the courtroom, from the way he walked. Long strides, the kind that assumed a path would clear for them. He was coming out of the elevator with 2 associates behind him, all 3 of them in suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he was talking without looking at the person walking beside him. He stopped when he saw the name on the motion in his hand. Not at her. He didn't look at her. He looked at the paper, but his associate looked at her. And then Aldrin looked up and saw her, in her gray uniform with the county seal on the chest, and the associate leaned over and said something low, and Aldrin looked at the motion again and then looked at her again. She kept mopping. The morning Jeffrey Aldrin's office filed their response to the motion, Delia was called into her supervisor Raymond Kutz's office. Raymond was a decent man who had always been fair with her. He looked uncomfortable in the way people look uncomfortable when they've been asked to do something they find slightly distasteful, but feel they cannot refuse. I've gotten a call, he said, from someone in the court administrator's office. There's a concern that you were reviewing case materials during work hours. I reviewed publicly available filings on my own time. The call specifically mentioned, on my own time, she said again evenly. I've never once looked at a case file on shift. If they have evidence otherwise, I'd be happy to see it. Raymond looked at his desk. I'm not saying I believe the concern, Delia. I'm saying I got the call and I have to pass it along. I understand, she said. Is there anything else? He looked at her for a moment. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said. Thank you for telling me. She went back to work. The motion hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and Delia Oakes was not there for it because she had a shift starting at 7 and a daughter to get to school by 8, and she was not a party to the case and had no reason to be in the room. She was emptying trash cans on the second floor when Terrence Polk texted her. Motion granted. Judge excluded the appendix. Plaintiff has to refile damages with a corrected calculation. Buell is going to be okay. She read the text twice. Then she put her phone in her pocket and kept working. She thought about what it meant, the way she thought about most things. Practically, in terms of what came next. What came next was that Aldrin and Forsyth would produce a corrected calculation. What came next was that the trial would resume. What came next was that Marcus Buell, who employed 83 people in a neighborhood where the unemployment rate was 3 points above the county average, would probably not lose his company over a spreadsheet error that should have been caught before the first filing. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt like someone who had found a wrong answer on a chalkboard and corrected it. That was all. The feeling was clean and simple, like a room after you've finished cleaning it. She didn't expect to see Jeffrey Aldrin again. She had no reason to. He did not move through the same spaces she did, except by accident, and she had spent 6 years becoming very good at being invisible in the spaces she occupied. But she saw him 3 weeks after the hearing, in the lobby of the courthouse, and this time he saw her seeing him. He was alone. That was different. The associates were somewhere else, and he was standing near the security checkpoint with his briefcase and his certainty, and then he wasn't certain because he recognized her and he stopped. Delia was pushing her cart toward the elevator. She slowed, but she didn't stop. He said her name. Ms. Oakes. She stopped. I wanted, he began, and then stopped. A man like Jeffrey Aldrin, she suspected, did not often begin sentences he didn't know how to finish. She waited. The error in the appendix, he said. My team should have caught it. Yes, she said. They should have. He looked at her with an expression she didn't have a name for. Not embarrassed exactly. Something more reluctant than that. How did you find it? I read the appendix. The forensic accountant we retained took 4 days to confirm what you found. I know. A silence. How long did it take you? She thought about it honestly. About 20 minutes, the first time. I spent longer writing it up to make sure I hadn't made an assumption. He looked at her for a moment, really looked, in a way that felt different from being seen, because being seen and being looked at were not the same thing. She had spent years being seen the way furniture was seen, noted, registered, worked around. This was different. Do you have a background in? No, she said. I don't have a degree. I didn't finish college. I'm good at math. He nodded slowly, not the nod of someone who understood, but the nod of someone who was beginning to understand they had not understood something. I'm sorry, he said, for the call to the administrator's office. She looked at him. Was that you? A pause that lasted long enough to be an answer. It won't happen again, he said. She nodded once. Then she pushed her cart to the elevator and pressed the button and waited for the doors to open. Terrence Polk called her the following week. He said he'd been thinking, and then he said a few other things that took a while to arrive at a point, and the point, when he finally got there, was that he had a friend who ran a continuing education program at DePaul, a paralegal certification course, and that the friend owed him a favor, and that if Delia was interested, he could arrange a full scholarship. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not saying you need a piece of paper, he said quickly. I want to be clear about that. I've been practicing for 27 years, and I've never seen anyone do what you did with a public filing and a night to work. What you have is real, and it doesn't need a stamp on it. But, she said. But the world works the way the world works, he said. And a piece of paper gives you a door where right now you're going in through a window. She thought about Raina. She thought about the kitchen table at 1 a.m. She thought about her grandmother's voice, which had sounded certain in the way. Only voices can sound when they've survived long enough to know that certainty isn't the same as loudness. You always could see straight to the bottom of a thing. Her grandmother used to say, don't let anybody make you feel like that's not worth something. I'd have to do it at night, she said. My daughter, the program is online mostly, some weekends. I checked before I called. She almost laughed. You checked. I checked, he said. You can say no, this isn't. I'm not trying to fix something that isn't broken. I just thought you should know the door exists. She looked out the window of her car. She was in the parking lot again. Same spot she always took the important calls, engine running, the trees along the street bare in November. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. She thought about it for a week, and then she signed up. She told Raina at dinner that same night. She said she was going to take some classes, that it would mean some Friday evenings and some Saturday mornings, that Grandma would come over on those days. Raina put her fork down and looked at her with the direct, unblinking gaze she'd had since she was 3 years old, the gaze that saw through things the way Delia's grandmother said Delia always had. Is it math? Raina asked. Some of it. Good, Raina said, and picked her fork back up. The Buell trial concluded 6 weeks later. The corrected damages calculation reduced the plaintiff's claim by just over $1 million. The jury awarded a partial judgment, considerably smaller than Aldrin and Forsyth had pursued. Marcus Buell retained the company. The 83 people kept their jobs. None of this made the news. It was not that kind of story. It was the kind of story that lived entirely in a courthouse hallway and a 1 a.m. kitchen and a phone call made from a parking lot. Delia Oakes started her first DePaul class on a Friday night in January, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her laptop in the particular quiet of a house where a child is asleep and the world outside has slowed down for a moment. She opened the course module. The first unit was on legal research methodology, and it started with a section on how to read a filing. She smiled at that. Just a little. She was already on page 3 when midnight came. There is a kind of intelligence that does not announce itself. It doesn't carry the right credentials, or wear the right clothes, or arrive through the front door with references. It shows up in the margins of things, in the way someone reads a document nobody asked them to read, in the way someone makes a call they have no reason to make, in the way someone stays up past midnight, not because they have to, but because the math is there, and the math matters, and somebody should get it right. The world misses this kind of intelligence constantly. It walks past it in hallways. It dismisses it at the door. It assumes, with extraordinary confidence, that brilliance lives only in the places brilliance has been formally welcomed. Delia Oakes knew the error in that assumption, before she ever found the error in the appendix. She'd known it since she was 8 years old at her grandmother's kitchen table, working through problems nobody had assigned her, simply because the numbers were there and they were asking to be understood. The door was always open. She just had to walk through it on her own terms.